Welcome to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we make sense of modern parenting one real conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, mom of six and a former teacher, and your trusted friend helping you cut through the noise of today's parenting overload. If you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to help your child manage stress, energy, or big emotions, especially with today's pressures, you're not alone. Here, we talk with experts, parents, and educators to bring you practical, heartfelt support for real family life. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Christine Volden. Christine is an entrepreneur, meditation instructor, and founder of Energy Master, a program that helps both kids and adults develop emotional resilience and energetic regulation through simple yet powerful visualization practices. With a background in speech pathology, child development, and a deep experience in energy work, Christine brings a unique lens to parenting today's sensitive, dynamic children. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, let's start with giving our listeners a little bit of background. What led you from speech pathology in child development into meditation and energy work?
Yeah, that's a long journey, but I'll try to summarize it. I was fascinated with child development and kind of like all things health and like alternative health from the time I was like a young kid. And I'm not really sure why. Like my mom worked in like a health food co-op for a while, and I learned a lot of things from that. But I ended up getting a degree in speech pathology, and I went right into the Peace Corps. And I worked in a school for disabled kids, and it was so eye-opening for me to see, especially like in a developing country, right? Because they kind of load everyone into that school just because of resources. So there were hearing impaired kids, there were kids with severe autism, there were kids with cerebral palsy, and then there were just kids with ADHD who maybe didn't fit into the normal school structure. So that was just such an as a human, that was just, I thought, like such a great experience. And as someone who knew I was going to be a parent someday, I just like tried to soak it all in. But at the end of the day, I realized that specific job wasn't for me. I'm like a little bit of an impatient person, and speech pathology is about like very, very slow progress. So it wasn't really right for me, but I love all kids and I love working with kids, and but it was a great, education. And then I moved back to the States eventually, and I started working in business and entrepreneurship. At that time, like startups were all over the place. I worked in some of the first startups and ended up having a career for a long time in sales, and technology sales, which was great because I love like new things. I love new technology. So it was great for me. But right after I had kids, I have two kids who are now like teen and preteens. And, after both of them were born, I really started questioning it, right? Like I liked the job, but I didn't like the field that I was working in. I didn't feel like I was giving back, especially as someone who was a Peace Corps volunteer. That was really important to me. And so I just really started diving into like, well, what would I want to do? And so there was a lot of trial and error there. And I do love being an entrepreneur. So I started a lot of different companies I was doing. And it's interesting. I think what led to this is I started doing sales coaching, and I still do that. In fact, that's how we met, right? And what I realized with that was so fascinating, because I was like, you know what? Everyone teaches like the sales stuff, right? How to negotiate, how to do pricing. But no one was teaching like the mindset around selling. And that's what I had observed for working in decades in sales was a big differentiator. There were people who had like all the great training, who were super intelligent, and they wouldn't be successful. And then there were people who were like the opposite, had like zero training, and they were just natural salespeople. And I was like, that's so interesting. And so I realized like, a lot of it's their mindset. And so people would ask me like, well, how do I develop the right mindset, or how do I build confidence? And I'm like, yeah, great question. I don't, and I had to really spend a lot of time thinking about that. And at the end of the day, that comes down to your energy, which is made up of a couple different things, right? And I always say it's the way you manage it, right? Some people are super sensitive. Some people classify themselves as like highly sensitive people. Some people just classify themselves as introverts or extroverts. And I myself am an introvert, so I really noticed that. And I noticed, other people's energy like really affects me. So that was one part of it. And then the other part is really the programming that we get. And we all get programmed from society, from our parents, from any organization that we're part of, from media, right? And especially as an introvert, and seeing my kids in the school system, I saw how much like bias there were around certain types of people. There was this great book called Quiet by Susan Cain, and it's all about introverts. I forget the subtitle of the book, but I remember buying that for a bunch of the administrators in my kids' elementary school, because it's about how there's this bias for extroverted people in society. And they were all so grateful. So years later, people were like, oh, I remember you bought me that book and it was so helpful. So anyway, that's a very long, not short story of how I started studying energy work.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that you're a mom yourself, and so when you're kind of going through this, I assume, you're maybe working with your kids too, or kind of testing things out on yourself and your family. Yeah. What are some of those personal experiences that you've had raising teenagers that have influenced your development of the energy mastery program or approach for families?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do want to say the first thing, like I can't, and I think any parent knows this, you can't force your kids to want to be into something. So trust me, I've tried. And sometimes they're open to it a little bit, sometimes they're not, and I just have to kind of be okay with that. So I really, the biggest thing for me is I really try to lead by example and do my own things and manage my own energy and just hope that my kids are like paying attention a tiny bit. And then occasionally, they'll ask me questions, but often than not, if I give a suggestion, they're really not interested, and that might be their age. But I will say some of the biggest experiences happened during COVID when we were all kind of in lockdown. Like, I live in California, and I know every area is different, but people were very, very conservative during COVID. Like, we were kind of like isolated, and we didn't have a lot of interaction with people, and there was a lot of fear. And so it was really interesting. Like, my kids had developed this, we called it a prayer. And I was raised religious, but I didn't really love the churches that I found in my community. There was nothing bad about them, but they just didn't really fit what I wanted. But I wanted my kids to have some kind of spiritual practice. So we started doing this prayer, and it's so interesting because I teach this to kids and adults differently. But basically, they had their bubble, right, which is kind of, some people would call it an aura, and they created this like protection around themselves, and then they would put this like protection item outside of this bubble that would kind of like buffer any energy that came in. And also, my kids, I have two kids, very, very different personalities, like night and day, right? One's super, super extroverted, and one's just like a little bit more quiet and contemplative. So it was interesting seeing, but they definitely were both feeling like, I could tell they were just being affected. I mean, who wasn't affected during COVID with all of the stuff that was going on? They couldn't see their friends. They, could feel like some people super scared, some people not. It was really confusing, and they were fairly young at that time. So we did a lot of talking about like their energy and how to feel safe. And I kept telling them, like, right, other people can't make you feel safe or not safe. You can observe them, but like you can decide in your heart how you want your energy to feel. And then the funny thing is I would give them extra practices. I'd be like, let's put extra protection around your bubble. And I remember my son was like, yeah, I'm already doing that. So it's like, I feel like kids are so intuitive. Sometimes I would learn stuff from them, and I would think that I was teaching them. So, but that's like one example.
Yeah, and you had mentioned like you started this with your kids when they were younger during COVID. Yeah. So why do you think that it's important to have these conversations with our kids, or kind of teach them how to manage their energy and emotions from an early age?
Yeah, because I think it just gets harder as you get older, right? When you're a kid, you're really looking to adults for guidance, whether that's your teachers, your parents, other people in the community. And you're really open. Like, they say that your subconscious as a kid is like wide open until you're like 7, 8 years old. And so you're taking in everything around you, right? And you're observing. And if you live in a place where there's like a lot of fear, or people don't know how to manage their boundaries or their energy, you kind of like do the same thing. And I think with parents, it's especially important to be mindful. And I remember thinking that, I'm like, everything I do, my kids are absorbing, right? And so I was always trying to like be calm myself, because I'm like, okay, they're learning from me. And so much when I do kind of intuitive readings for people, I can see the programming that they've taken on from parents. And usually it's not just parents, because the way you act as a parent is the way, often you act, you acted as a child with your parent, or you're mirroring what they did. So often we learn patterns from parents who have learned them from grandparents, who have learned them from great grandparents. And then we're literally programming our kids, right? If you're a person who's super nervous all the time and not sure of yourself, like your kids might they just kind of mimic you, and they do the same thing. So that's why I think it's so hard. And then as kids get older, they start really noticing, and my kids are at this age now, right, where they're like, they care about other people think. They care about what their friends think. They're starting to understand their identity. And, I don't think it's ever too late to start understanding how to work with energy, but I'm so glad my kids had that foundation, at least, where they had at least this one tool to use. Because I think it gets harder and harder, and that's the interesting thing about this kind of preteen teen time, is that they're figuring it out, and there's a lot of trial and error. And I just want them to have, and everything I teach with Energy Mastery is about tools. Like, I want them to have tools to use. So if they feel uncomfortable or they're trying to figure something out, they just have something that they can rely on, that helps them feel a little bit more confident.
Yeah, and then for families that may not be doing some of these things, or maybe they are and they just don't realize it, what are some of those simple strategies that parents can use to maybe notice their child's energy might be overwhelming, or like, what's the next step? What's the first step?
Yeah, great question. I think the first step is really to be quiet and observe. So often as parents, we want to like give advice or fix things or do something, right? And sometimes you just have to sit back and let your child make their own mistakes and observe them and see like what's going on. And instead of telling them like, hey, and I just want to say, I don't do this perfectly by any means, but I, ask your kids questions, when they come home and they say like, oh, I had this really difficult situation, instead of saying like, oh, I'm so sorry, or, oh, that's not that bad. It's like, ask questions about it. How does that make you feel? And that's the biggest thing, because sometimes, and I think so many of us are just not emotionally fluent in like the language. So we don't even know all of the different emotions. We can't even always recognize how we're feeling. So it's really beautiful if kids can start using, descriptive words to describe like their emotions or how they're feeling. They might be like, well, I'm sad, but it's kind of like more than that, or I'm worried, right? Like, and give them some, tools to explain it. I think some therapist a long time ago gave me this like emotion wheel, and it had like all of these different emotions. And I was like, wow, this is so great, because like most kids probably could name like, 4 emotions. And it's, so I think that's the first step, is observing. And then, I ask my kids like, well, how do you, so you're feeling this. And first of all, like validating that. Cause sometimes, especially like kids at like that preteen teen age, they're like so upset about something, and you're like, that's not something to be upset about. but like, I don't want to invalidate them. So I'm like, okay, great. That's great to know that you felt that. Like, how do you, like, what do you want to do with that? Like, how do you want to feel? Like, kind of just asking questions, and not like we're trying to fix it, but like ask questions. And then what I do is just kind of like observe them and see like, well, what do they do when they're feeling this way? They're feeling upset or worried. Like, what do they do when they're feeling that way? Do they distract themselves with their phones? Do they like immediately come up with some strategy? And so I do like a lot of observing. And then, I might just like, like sometimes I'll just say something like, oh yeah, I remember when I felt this way, I did, this is how I dealt with it. And I'm really trying to not give advice, because then, the minute I do that, they're like, yeah, no thanks.
I'm going to do the opposite.
So I think it's a lot of observing and like questioning, and then just, if you can lead by example, or you can, do something like that. I think that's, every kid is different though.
Yeah, I think too, like to your point of like modeling the behavior, right? So even reflecting on, oh yeah, when I'm stressed, I pick up my phone and I start scrolling for a few minutes, or even being able to notice those sorts of interactions that are being modeled for your kids. So what are some ways that maybe parents can help like regulate themselves, or practices, or strategies to help ground themselves in those moments where they're feeling like overwhelmed, and then that be that modeling moment for their kids too.
Yeah, and that's so important because even as kids get older, they're always looking to their parents of how are they dealing with something, right? How do you react when you're watching the news and you see something that like really disturbs you, right? What do you do? So that's why it's so important for parents to do that. So I think there's a couple different things. Number one is really grounding. I do this 6-month energy mastery program, and the very first month I always teach grounding, because if you're not grounded, it's like all of the other practices don't really matter as much. So to ground, there's a couple things. Now I do visualizations around, working with the grounding cord and all this stuff. But even if you don't want to do that, one of the best things you can ground is just be outside in nature. Right? Just go outside and walk, around some trees, or take a walk outside and don't look at your phone and just be present. For other people who are just like really like high energy, like doing some exercise, go for a run, go for a brisk walk, do something that gets you, because grounding is about being in your physical body, right? And being connected to the earth. And you can tell when someone's not grounded, right? Like a great example, you go to talk to someone, they're kind of like spacey, or they're not really present, or they're like out in Wonderland, or they're daydreaming, right? That's like the opposite of grounded. Being grounded means you are present and you are like in your physical body. So, go for a walk in nature, go just be quiet somewhere. If you're like stuck in an office building all day, like go and sit in a conference room by yourself for like 10 minutes. And I'll tell you, when I used to work in a corporate job, like that was challenging for me to sit quietly for 10 minutes. I'd be like that feels like forever. And you kind of have to build up that muscle of just being present and grounded. But yeah, I mean, those are the easiest things. But if you want to get really into like a visual, you can just imagine a grounding cord, right? From the base of your spine all the way down to the center of the earth. And just, like imagine that like connecting you and you bringing in that energy. But yeah, that's like the first thing that I would do. And the second thing is really managing your boundaries. And that's what I always teach in month 2, because so many people have hard times with boundaries. And people think, oh, boundaries, it's like saying no when I don't want to, instead of saying yes. But it's so much more than that, because we have like energetic boundaries, right? And a great way to describe that, right? If someone comes up and speaks to you like right next to your face, you're like, oh, it's like you're in my personal space. It's very uncomfortable. But sometimes people do that with their energy, right? And sometimes you're just like, oh, why do I feel like so uncomfortable around this person? It's because their energy is interfering with yours, and maybe you guys run your energy differently. And that's why I talk a lot about introverts and extroverts, especially because I'm an introvert. I really notice if someone's really extroverted, I'm like, ooh, like calm down a little. But they're not doing anything. They're just being themselves, and that's fine. Like the world needs introverts and extroverts. We balance each other. But sometimes I need to be like, okay, step back. And so I just imagine that same bubble or aura. And sometimes I'll imagine, oh, I'm going to push it out a little bit because like I need a little extra space around this person. So, visualizing things like, your aura and just like, creating some separation in between a person can really help. And that's why most of the things I teach are like visual tools. Like, okay, and it sounds so silly, but I've worked with people for so long and in so many different ways that people are like, oh my God, this works. This is like, I can't believe it. All I have to do is imagine it. And I'm like, yeah, like, because you're managing your energy. Everything, there's this quote someone said, people say Albert Einstein said it. I don't know if he did. And he says, like, everything is energy. That's all there is, right? And it's true, right? Everyone has the power to manage their own energy.
What are you most excited about offering to parents through the updated energy mastery programs that you're providing?
Well, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to teach.
More about what you do.
Yeah, I'm excited to teach like more parents. Actually, I'm trying to think. Everyone but one person in my current group are parents. But I just know when I kind of learned this, because I did a really extensive like meditation school training, and it was like beyond that. But I remember that was like the first thing I was like, this is so helpful for being a parent. Like, it's just because parenting brings up so much, right? We all have, like, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be a good parent, right? And but there's so much on our plate, and we're told so many things. Oh, we have to watch what they're eating, how much time they're on their phone, if they're doing their homework, like if they're healthy, if they get vaccinated, if they don't get vaccinated. It's like there's so much, because we have access to so much information. It's like overwhelming to be a parent. And if you have any desire to be like a good parent, you probably feel guilty a lot of the time. And I think that's probably the deepest lesson that I've learned of doing this work is how to not have judgment for myself, whether it's as a parent or just a human. Like, I'm not perfect, and I'm never going to be a perfect parent. And I, like, the best I can do is try my hardest, right? And just to be gentle on myself. And so that's what I think is like such a gift for parents, because if you really learn how to manage your energy, you get into a space where you don't have judgment. And it's very obvious to see our judgment about other people. And, most kind of self-aware people are like, oh, yeah, I kind of judge that person. But we don't realize how much we judge ourselves. And that's the biggest thing. Because self-judgment is like the thing that really F's us up, to be honest. It's like we all want to be so perfect, and it's just not realistic. And so that's what I think is like the biggest gift to parents, like beyond, there's all this like, stuff I can teach them about managing their energy and helping their kids and staying more calm and grounded. But like not having judgment, I think to me is just like an amazing gift to give to people.
That sounds amazing. I love it. I mean, I as a mom of 6, I fall into that cycle that you described like every day, multiple times a day. So
right.
And our listeners too are resonating with your message of, this kind of, and society puts that pressure on us too, to your earlier points where what we're fed, how we're kind of programmed is so ingrained in our experiences that we've lived and the societal pressures and all of those things where we're like searching for that perfect like Instagrammable moment, right, from our day. When that in reality, like it's a mess behind the scenes. Like we're all a work in progress. And I think like that's the kind of eye-opening realization that I'm coming to too, of like progress is better than perfection, right? Striving for progress, 1% better each day for our kids is really, that's huge. Like that's better than we were yesterday. That's better than we were 30 days ago. So there's a lot to be said about that kind of continuous work that we're doing to support ourselves and our families. But
absolutely.
We have a segment near the end of our podcast where we ask questions from our community. So we have a parent helper named Emmy, and so she's a support system for families to help with these kind of like questions that come up in modern family life. And so one of the questions from our community is that my child is sensitive and anxious before school. How can I help build their confidence in the mornings? And then maybe if you have any like visualization or energy exercise you suggest like to help with morning routines.
Yeah, that's a great question. My kid, oh man, one of my kids was like, I had to sit with him in preschool for like 20 minutes before he would let me leave, like the entire time of preschool, not just like the first year. So I totally empathize with this person. Do we have any idea how old the child is? I'm thinking it's a younger child.
I think it's a younger child, so like grade school age, like early
grade. So I love this this concept of seniority, and this is another thing that I teach. There's like 6 core like principles that I teach, and seniority is basically the idea that we can always control like how we want to feel in any situation, right? Because we can never control other people and their responses, but we can always control like how we want to respond. In the beginning, we can't always, right? And especially a young kid is still like trying to figure that out. But I think it's really important for us all to know that we can take ownership of our experience. The opposite of seniority is like giving over your seniorities to someone else. So a great example is like you go to a doctor and they tell you something and you're like, okay, I believe you blindly with no questions asked, right? Not that doctors are, wrong, but sometimes they are. And it's our bodies and our experiences. Same with like someone who goes to church and they're, the person who's leading the church might say like, this is wrong, or this has to happen, or this is bad if you ever do that. But that's, and not saying any of that's wrong, but the person may or may not, have the same point of view, and you're allowed to question that. So I would really want to empower that child and be like, hey, what do you think would, like, I would ask them. I'd be like, what would help you feel safe? Like, what do you not feel safe from? And I would definitely, and I'd be really curious about that question, because kids always have different things. Like, my daughter had like a really strange fear of fire and of like things burning down. And this was like really, really young. And like, I'm like, who knows where this came from? Right. And so I'd be like, okay, well, what would make you feel safe? And she was like, well, she was really worried. She had this little lovey she would bring to school. And so she was so worried about it. And I'm like, okay. Like, and again, I'm like, this is kind of a weird thing. I don't know what this is about. Yeah. But we ended up like buying like a fireproof pouch to put in her backpack. And it was like very inexpensive. But I was like, I wanted to validate her. I'd be like, okay, is this going to make you feel comfortable? So you don't always have to do that, but I'd like to validate their feelings, kind of understand. And then I would say, two things. Number one, teaching them a really basic grounding exercise. Like, oh my God, if you imagine you're like a tree and you're so strong. And like the cool thing about trees is like they talk to all the other trees. And if they're feeling worried, they might send energy through the roots to another tree, and that tree might give them support. So I would tell them, and I used to tell my son this. There's this amazing book called like The Kissing Hand, and
that's such a good book.
I think I know that book by heart because I read it every single morning when I was waiting for my son. And the whole story is like, we all have to do things that we don't want to do sometimes. And I would just like, and then the mama raccoon kisses the little boy on the palm of his hand, and I would kiss my son's hand, and I'd be like, you can hold that on your heart, and I'm always with you. So I'm like there with you, supporting you. And I would tell my son that. I'd be like, anytime you're worried, like, feel your heart. My heart is connected to yours the same way the trees are all connected. And so if you send me saying like, hey, I'm worried, just send me that energy through your heart. I'm going to send you back love. And you just have to feel that. And so that's kind of like one of the things I would do with grounding, because you can't, like with kids, you have to give them like kind of a more visual thing. And then I would teach them the bubble exercise too. I'd be like, you have your own bubble right around you, and it's yours. No one has to get in. That's your energy. You can let things in. You can let love in. You can let hugs in. You can let good stuff in. But you don't have to let in anything you don't want. So if you feel something uncomfortable, because kids are so intuitive, they pick up on like the very, very slightest energy around them. So there could be another kid who doesn't know how to manage their energy. It could be a teacher who's in a bad mood, right? So I'd be like, you protect yourself. And this was great because I always use a rose for protection for adults, because it's like kind of the universal sign for the soul. But I used to let my kids, I'd be like, you pick your protection item. And my son would be like, okay, it's a soccer ball. My daughter would be like, oh, it's a unicorn, right? So I'd be like, okay, because that's another way to empower them, right? And I would say, well, why don't you pick something today that can protect you around your bubble? Like, you get to pick what it is. And, I think for a while my son had a dragon, which was pretty cool. But like, and it just gives them their own way to protect it. But those are the things that I would do with my kids. And it's such a common thing. And I think it's really important to validate that because that child is picking up the energy, and like we all have that ability, but we program it out of ourselves, and kids are so magical that they like feel that. So that's an amazing gift for that kid. And any highly sensitive person or child, I just want to I just think it's so important to understand like that's a skill and that's a gift. It's not a bad thing. You just have to learn how to manage it.
I love that. I can't wait to have this conversation with my kids. Like, I want to put this into practice. Christine, before we close out today, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience?
Well, the biggest thing is I want to share a meditation for parents that they can do with their kids. So I was saying I'll do that on my website. I'll do it on christinevolden.com/LaunchFamily. But I'm going to do the meditation that I taught my kids, and I'll kind of walk through it and give some instructions about it. But yeah, I just want everyone to know, I think everyone was created on this earth with like the gifts that they're meant to have. And when we have some kind of challenge, even the word disability, I think is such a not appropriate word, because no one has like a disability without getting another gift, right? So I think, and that's what I've seen, being able to like intuitively read people, is that I can see that if even a major sense is taken away, you're given a gift somewhere else. And even if it's a minor thing, so it is always balanced out, and you just have to accept it. So I always say no one's in a situation where it's, you know, like you weren't given another gift. So I always say, like, no matter who you are, you have the power to manage your own energy, and you're given gifts to do that. Like, you were born with certain gifts. So, like, I'd love to help people explore them. So, I work with people one-on-one, and I do courses. My new energy mastery program is going to come out. And then I'm starting a bunch of workshops. So I'm excited to do one just for parents, because I think it's just such a needed thing. And it, you know, what we learn, I always say how you do one thing is how you do everything. So learning how to manage our kids, if that's what motivates you, or manage your own energy, is going to help you in every other part of your life. So if it's helping your kids that gets you into it, if it's being an entrepreneur and learning to sell that gets you into it, at the end of the day, it's all the same tools. So yeah, whatever works for you is great. So I guess that's it.
Christine, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, tools, and personal experiences with us today. You know, the heart-centered approach to the energy and mindset, emotional resilience is such a breath of fresh air for today's parents. Like, just that we can all take a deep breath. It's okay. It's about progress over perfection, right?
Yep.
You know, if you loved today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and check out the links in the show notes for Christine's new offerings, including a special guided meditation gift for Launch Family listeners. Until next time, remember that you're not alone, and parenting doesn't have to be a solo mission. We're here with you, cheering you on every step of the way.